Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. In a major diplomatic victory for India, the United Nations Security Council has designated Masood Azhar as a global terrorist. Azhar is the leader of Jaish-e-Mohammed, which carried out the Pulwama attack in February that killed 40 CRPF troops in Jammu and Kashmir. The UN move comes after China dropped its objection to the listing. China had placed a technical hold on the proposal initiated by the US, the UK and France after the Pulwama attack. Beijing's decision can largely be seen as an outcome of international pressure to blacklist the Pakistan-based terror organization's head. The US, supported by France and the UK, moved a draft resolution directly in the UN Security Council to blacklist the terrorist. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze India's diplomatic victory and what implications will the listing have on Masood Azhar and Pakistan. Joining me on the program today are Pant, Head Strategic Studies, Observer Research Foundation, Major General Dhruv Katoch, retired Director, India Foundation, and Ashok Sajjanhar, former Ambassador. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you. What are the circumstances that led to Masood Azhar being listed as a global terrorist?
I think basically, if one were to put it in a nutshell, it was the pressure from the international community, particularly the United States, the United Kingdom and France, that China found difficult to bear, and it had to relent ultimately, because we see that in March, when the initial proposal was brought by these three countries and China put a technical hold in the 1267 committee, because this is a committee under the UN Security Council. So the discussions were going on in the committee, and China put a hold there, as it has been putting a hold for the last three times, because we had first started this, we had first moved the proposal for listing Masood Azhar way back in 2009 after the 26/11 attack. And at that time also a technical hold had been put, a veto had been exercised by China. Then again in 2016 after the Pathankot attack, 2017, also the three members of the United Security Council, permanent members, they had put, and then again in March. And then here after the Pulwama attack, I think this could be seen really as the last straw on the camel's back, because it got all the other 14 members of the UN Security Council on one side, which said that he should be designated as an international terrorist. China still stood firm there, and after that the United States and France and others, they said that we are going to bring this matter up to the UN Security Council for a full debate there, so that China will have to come out in the open and explain as to how a terrorist of this nature, Jaish-e-Mohammed, has been under the UN sanctions, designated as a terrorist entity since 2001. And how is it that the leader of this terrorist organization, that what are the reasons why China is supporting, China is defending? And I think the pressure became too much for China to bear. It saw that it had got isolated, and it relented. Of course, it has tried to make virtue out of a necessity, saying that, additional information was provided, which of course was provided when Foreign Secretary Vijay Gokhale went to China very recently. So additional information, but that is not only to China, that was to everyone. But really there was no reason for additional information being required, because Masood Azhar himself had acknowledged and accepted the responsibility, had taken the responsibility that the attack against the CRPF convoy had been carried out by Jaish-e-Mohammed. So no further evidence was required. Right. But China tried to use that as a cover-up to say why they are changing their position. And of course, as you said, it's a huge diplomatic win for India.
Certainly. General, I'd like to bring you into the picture now at this juncture. So what are the implications for Masood Azhar, and what does the listing really mean? What changes?
You see, as far as Masood Azhar is concerned, I don't think it will make too much of a difference to him per se. He was not leaving Pakistan even otherwise. But now if he leaves Pakistan, I think anywhere in the world he can be arrested. So he is, we can call him a proclaimed fugitive. He is still staying in Pakistan. Pakistan is not going to touch him as of now. The second point of it is all his financial dealings across the world, if they can actually be stopped now. But I really don't know how much of his financial dealings are being done outside Pakistan. So if there is something which is being done outside Pakistan, I think all that can be frozen and those assets can be taken away. To that extent, there will be a check on this particular terrorist. More importantly, this man used to actually go out and have huge rallies. I think that is a thing of the past now. Pakistan may actually protect him and keep him within the territory.
But will Pakistan also curb that?
If Pakistan is not in a position now to let him carry out those type of mass rallies. Because if Pakistan does that, then they will be complicit. I don't think Pakistan will do that. But at the same time, I don't think Pakistan is going to take any action per se against this fellow. They may keep him in safe custody and say that we have put him under house arrest. But that will be really to secure him rather than to keep him under house arrest. As far as Pakistani attitude on terrorism is concerned, I really don't see any major change in that, because should they actually start taking military action against these organizations like the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, the Hizbul Mujahideen? These are the organizations which have been nurtured by the Pakistani state. And now if the Pakistani state goes against them, then there will be a backlash by these organizations and their supporters on the Pakistani state. And this backlash will come from the heartland, that is Punjab.
Right.
Pakistan is already battling insurgency in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and in Fatah. They have got problems in Karachi, they have got problems in Sindh, they've got problems, very serious problems in Baluchistan. They are not in a very happy situation in Gilgit-Baltistan. But their key area is Punjab. And if they take action against these terrorist groups in Punjab, then that backlash is something which I do not think they will be able to handle. So regardless of what Imran Khan has, he made a statement when a group of foreign journalists were called a few days back, where he said that we have created these militant groups to fight the Soviet Union and now we will disband them. I don't think he's in a position to disband them. That is really bravado. But they will at least see that these activities are not overt. The way they kept Osama bin Laden confined and hidden, I think they will do the same as far as this particular terrorist is concerned also.
Okay, all right. Let me bring in Professor Harshvi Pant into the picture now. You know, Professor, a major diplomatic victory for India, like the ambassador was pointing out as well. But more importantly, what has changed between 2009 and 2019?
I think the global context has changed significantly, and I think the way India has projected itself in terms of great power management, that has evolved significantly. So I think China today was not in a position to continue to evade some of these issues that India had been asking China to come clean on. And I think this is a reflection of the sustained pressure that has been put on China from multiple fronts on this issue. There were so many hypocrisies in China's position, and China was getting, in some ways cornered by the, onslaught that it was facing from multiple fronts, that it became very difficult for China to sustain what was coming at the United Nations Security Council. And in particular, when you had the Americans and the Brits and the French deciding to take China on, basically to make China open its cards, basically to argue and showcase to the world the hypocrisies inherent in China's position, I think that put China in a situation that it could not have easily come out looking clean. And so this is the safest position now that China could have taken, and that it has gone to take that, it has gone ahead with that position. But I think it must be said that international pressure would not have been so acute had India not taken certain positions. Had India not, on the one hand, created a sustained pressure on Pakistan, had India not given the kind of evidence that was required to create the momentum against Pakistan, had India not taken on Pakistan on multiple forums, whether it was ICJ, whether it was FATF and others, had India not also, I think it should not be forgotten, what happened in Balakot. I think, many people have gotten into this tactical and operational matters as to what changed, what really did not change. I think the fundamental reality that changed is that now the pressure is on Pakistan to de-escalate. Right. And for the international community that used to come to India, crying, telling India how India should de-escalate, now they recognize that unless they ask Pakistan to make sure that Pakistan behaves with a modicum of responsibility, India will take charge of the situation, and that may not be something that many of our international interlocutors might support. So I think what we are now witnessing is that a sustained pressure was mounted. Americans and the West in particular decided that enough was enough, and that put China, which was playing this procedural game very, very effectively for a long, was put in a position where it was just not possible for it to continue that game. And I think the result is out in the open, and I think that for that Indian diplomacy should be congratulated for doing a wonderful job in terms of articulating an argument and making sure that it gets operationalized on the international platforms.
Okay, all right. I want to talk about China for a little while now. You know, Ambassador, as far as China is concerned, what does this mean for Sino-Indian ties? And also, do we see any kind of a reaction from China?
Reaction, in my view, no. As far as the Sino-Indian ties are concerned, you know, in addition to what Harsh has also said, let's also recognize and realize that India has played its cards in a very, very sophisticated manner. You know, when in March we saw that again China had put a technical hold, there was a demand from within the country that India should condemn, India should sort of, you know, come out in the open and speak against, you know, China's position, hypocrisy and doublespeak and so on and so forth. But India took a very, very measured position on that. That there were conversations, there was a conversation, there was talk going on with China behind the doors and trying to put pressure on them, trying to convince them, while also at the same time being in touch with the major powers, with the other members of the UN Security Council, and advising them and informing them, giving them all the additional information. So I think this sort of dealing with all the countries together, that has really paid dividends. We have seen that, you know, meaning China also, it has not come out in this whole episode smelling of roses, of course, but then it has also not been humiliated in the sense that, you know, its back was not against the wall, and it has been able to come out and say that, you know, because of the additional information that we have decided to withdraw our technical hold. But coming to the position as to in terms of what is the way ahead as far as India-China relations are concerned, I think people have, after Doklam, we saw the Wuhan thing coming up. But then, of course, after Wuhan, we have had the listing of Masood Azhar and all this. I think it has left a poor taste, in my view, in India's mouth, you know, because China has really been dragging its feet, and even the statement that it has come out with today, it has said that the whole international community must recognize the huge contribution that Pakistan has made against terrorism, and that China will continue to work with Pakistan in terms of dealing with issues of terrorism and so on and so forth. So I think this writing is very clear on the wall that China is definitely going to be supportive of Pakistan in whatever happens. And that is, I think, something that we need to internalize, that we need to think about. And we need to, as far as our relations going forward with China are concerned, keep that at the back of our mind. So the lesson that it really leaves me with is focus on our own national comprehensive strength, our domestic strength, our economic strength, and our military preparedness.
Right.
Because that is the only way in which India will be able to deal with China in an effective manner, in a robust manner.
Okay. And staying on with China, General, you know, like the Professor and the Ambassador have already pointed out, that, you know, sustained international pressure, taking up this issue of terrorism at international fora is what has resulted in this. But could it also be, you know, the fact that we stayed away from the BRI summit? The BRI is a pet project of Xi Jinping. CPEC also, you've raised several, you know, objections about. Could this also have had an impact on the listing of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist?
No, I think what China is seeing today is a very firm Indian policy. You know, let's face it, in the last 5 years, there have been many achievements of the Modi government, but I would place their achievements on the foreign policy front as the highest. It has really changed the landscape, both when you're looking at it internally and across the world. You speak to any of the diaspora which is outside, and they will tell you they have never seen India in such a position, ever. So this obviously, I think we have to compliment the Prime Minister. We have to compliment the entire External Affairs Ministry and every single ambassador of ours in all those countries, because it is their collective effort which has put India in this situation and it has brought us here. But when we look at China, there's one thing which I just want to talk just a little bit about Balakot, which I think is important to understand and which will also explain China's stance. You see, when Balakot took place, after that, Mr. Jaitley gave a statement. And in that statement, he said very clearly, he says Balakot was not in retaliation to the Pulwama attack. Now, people really haven't understood the import of those words. What he said was, as far as Pulwama was concerned, we took revenge immediately within the next few days. Every single terrorist who was responsible for Pulwama was eliminated. So that revenge was complete. Now we come to Balakot. Balakot, they were planning another attack. And that was in Pakistan. It was not in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And because they were planning another attack, we went and eliminated them there. Now that gave a message to the world that India will act unilaterally. I think that message which has gone across has really made the world deeply concerned that India will react to any provocation, even if it is not attacked. So the pressure, as very rightly as Harsh put it, is now on Pakistan. The de-escalation is theirs because India will react the way it feels. If it finds any terrorists there, anywhere in Pakistan, I think we have got the moral right now to go and attack them. And it is this pressure also which has actually made the Chinese do what they are doing. The second point is their support to Pakistan, as the ambassador very rightly said. Now, China will continue to support Pakistan. Let's make, you see, there are two reasons why they want to do that. One reason is that for China, Pakistan is their card against India. To perpetually keep India on the back foot, Pakistan is being used. That is one. And number two, they're very concerned about the CPEC. Now, the CPEC is going to run into very serious troubles. It is already running into trouble in Gilgit-Baltistan. But more importantly, it is running into trouble in Balochistan. And it is not going to go through. But China also realizes that unless India gives support, the CPEC is going to be, in a long term, a non-starter. Right. But India is not going to support this. And that stand has been made very clear. And whether China gives support on this particular issue or not, I don't think it is going to make a difference. India has taken a stance now. And I think this is the important thing to understand, that we will fight terrorism on our own.
Right.
And I think this stance, once you have become confident enough to state that we will do what we have to do, and we will do it independently. If the world comes with us, we will be happy to take the support. If they don't come with us, we will do it unilaterally. And I think that message has gone across, which is going to pay very handsome dividends to the country in the long term.
Absolutely. Professor, as the General has just pointed out, India's stance as far as CPC is concerned is very, very firm, and we've stuck to it right from the beginning. But will Beijing expect something out of China after Masood Azhar has been listed as a global terrorist?
Well, I'm sure they will, and I'm sure there is an expectation now that perhaps the slide that Sino-Indian relations had seen over the last few years would somehow balance itself out. But I think it is very unlikely that India would fundamentally change its position on some of the key issues that Sino-Indian relations have bedeviled with. So, I mean, you have already talked about BRI, you have already talked about how the project today is and the concerns that the project has had, which were first very forthrightly articulated by India. And if you see last week's summit forum where the Xi Jinping is making a statement, he is basically responding to the concerns that were first raised by India. India was one of the first articulations of what was wrong with Chinese approach to infrastructure and connectivity. And I think that is something that the other countries have imbibed and other countries have responded to, and even the Chinese were forced to respond to it. Now, that's not going out anywhere in the sense that India is going to stick to its position because of fundamental differences in the way that is being executed. Similarly, on other issues, for example, I don't see what perhaps can happen immediately on the border situation. I think what it might do is it might change slightly the atmospherics around Sino-Indian relations. Because look, Masood Azhar and NSG have become two of these issues for which, around which Indian discourse about China had become very, very negative. So this continuous battle that India was fighting just to get itself recognized as a victim of terrorism, and one country was standing in its as an obstruction. That was quite clearly a message in many ways that Sino-Indian relations would continue to face a big problem if this issue is not resolved. Similarly, there is NSG. Now, again, Chinese position on this issue has already been articulated. They may have withdrawn their objections on this issue, but the kind of statement they have made leaves rather one dissatisfied with the kind of argumentation they are trying to make, and one can understand it. Sino-Pakistan relation is a long-standing one, and it would continue to be what it is. But I think ultimately, what this move and perhaps some other moves, which I think are incumbent upon China to take, is to change the atmospherics around the relationship, because otherwise there are two messages that are getting out and that people in India are imbibing. One, that China does not really see India as a power that is emerging, as a global power, and B, it is not sensitive enough to India's core concerns, whereas India has always been very sensitive to Chinese core concerns. So I think this asymmetry in perception is a very important problem in the relationship, and unless China does something substantive to change these atmospherics, perhaps we are not going to move ahead on the more difficult question. And Mr. Modi, when he went to Wuhan, was actually trying to make a statement. He did not go to Wuhan, from a position of weakness. He went there after a very strong position on Doklam, and he went there to make a case to the Chinese that there are issues, both global and bilateral, on which China and India can work together, on which China and India can perhaps take their relationship in a more positive direction. And that has been, in some ways, with very careful diplomacy. Some of it has been assuaged. Some of these concerns are now, as we recognize today, some of that is coming out to fruition. But the larger structural problem in Sino-Indian relations remain where it is, and the position that China has taken vis-a-vis Pakistan remains what it is. Again, even in this case, the statement is very categorical that their position on terrorism in Pakistan is not going to change, whereas India's fundamental problem remains with Pakistan as far as terrorism is concerned. So I think technically now they can say, look, we have done something, why don't you reciprocate? But I think India would also, and Indian policymakers would do well to recognize that it is not going to, what they have done today is not, out of some genuine sense of goodwill, or that China now wants to rebuild relations with India. But I think it's as has been already discussed, it's about losing face, and it's about opening up the fear that they will have to open up their cards to the world. So I think the challenge now would be how do
Professor, I'd like to bring in the others as well, because I've got
emerge.
limited time on the program. So quick closing comments from all my three panelists now. Ambassador, talking about Sino-Pakistan ties, is this listing going to have any bearing on the ties between Beijing and Islamabad?
No, I don't think so. And I think China has made it very clear. And as we've been discussing, I think there are too many irons in the fire as far as China is concerned with Pakistan, that I don't think they are going to move out anywhere. In fact, we see in the recent years, there is the cooperation and the collaboration is getting even stronger. And not only for the $62 billion that China is sinking into CPEC, but also for the geostrategic importance, significance of this whole project. China and Pakistan, their relations are not going anywhere. I think Pakistan will continue to become an even more of a colony, so to say, of China, and doing its bid. And as far as its economy is concerned, we've seen it's getting more and more into a debt trap as far as this is concerned. So I think as far as this is concerned, and in terms of, the listing of Masood Azhar, what we've been discussing, that it would have had a salutary positive impact upon India, that China is being sensitive to India's concerns, if this veto had been removed right immediately after the Wuhan summit. But the sort of foot dragging that we have seen on the part of China, and trying to rationalize what should have come very, very clearly after Pulwama, when Masood Azhar has taken responsibility, has assumed responsibility. I think this has not gone down well, I'm sure, with the Indian leadership as also with the Indian people. Right.
So, General, that having been said, where does this leave, the listing leave Pakistan and its administration?
I think Pakistan is it is not in a very comfortable situation. while they will not take any action against these terrorist groups, now for them to actually give them open support is going to be very difficult. And if any of these groups carry out any actions outside Pakistan, I don't think they will be claiming it. That theoretically, if they carry out any action in India or anywhere else in the world, I think they are going to maintain a very, very low profile and not claim it. But the whole point is, if you don't claim it, how does the world know? So they are going to be placed into that dilemma as to how to take their terrorism narrative forward. As far as India is concerned, I think the statements which have been issued, which Mr. Jaitley has been issued, I think they should be reiterated time and time again that you have terrorists there whom we think are going to attack. We are not going to wait for them to attack us. We are going to attack you. And it is for the world now to tell Pakistan to back off. They are the terrorist state. They have to de-escalate. And in my view, what is de-escalation? In my view, de-escalation for Pakistan is to close each and every terrorist training camp which is there within Pakistan, and to hand over each and every one of those perpetrators of terror, including Masood Azhar, to India for trial. Now, that is the minimum we expect if you want an improvement in relationships.
All right. Professor, quick closing comment from you on what does this really mean, for our fight against terrorism?
It's a very significant victory for India. It is a very significant diplomatic victory for India. It may not change very many things on the ground, as has been articulated, but I think it's a very important symbolic victory. And in diplomacy, in international relations, symbolism is very, very significant, is very, very important. And I think that is why what China has done today and how China has been forced to do what it has done today will, I think, go very far in shaping perceptions about India, about India's rise, about Indian priorities, and about the way India is managing its foreign policy today.
All right. On that note, then, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. A major diplomatic victory for India, really, and something that we've been looking forward to for a while now. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it from me. See you again next time.